afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Jacobs. I'm the Commercial Operations or Commercial Excellence Lead at Organon for Asia Pacific. And before I jump in today, I just wanted to, of course, thank Next and thank Steve for such a good opportunity to come together, but also thank everyone that's contributed to a panel or a session. I've certainly learnt a lot, and there's been a bit of a theme through today as well around impact and around relevance and around putting the customer and the patient at the centre of things. And I'm not going to be able to, on the spot recall everything and kind of bring that into my presentation. But as I sat there today, there were a lot of kind of synergies with what I wanted to share. So I hope to bring kind of something pragmatic and a little bit of a different thought to you today. So I'm going to start with a bit of a confession. I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be working in data or focusing on KPIs or spending my days poring over dashboards. I started in the field actually in this industry, so I was carrying the bag. Learning the art of the sales conversation and navigating those up and down days in the field. And I did that for about 10 years. So I spent 10 years in various rep roles, worked on different brands, worked across different companies, and then worked in sales leadership before moving more into the commercial operations space where I find myself now. And I don't share that with you to sound like a walking, talking resume, but I share that with you because I think that forms a little bit of how I think about things in my role today, and the human kind of empathetic side I try and bring to my work. Whilst it's really important for me to be focused on the data and be looking at productivity and impact, I try and do that thinking about the people behind the numbers. I'm not an analyst, and you probably already got that from what I've just worked through. So there's a couple of my team on the screen there with me, and I wanted to kind of make sure they were represented because a lot of the great work that we put forward is a result of their skills. Whilst I'm not an analyst, I have come to really enjoy actually the type of work that I do, and I think many of us can lose our days to a lot of meetings, and we'll kind of get to that. But sometimes you find yourself with a run of free time. And that's actually what I experienced recently, and it gave me an opportunity to sit back and really dive into the numbers. Okay, and that forms the basis of a case study I'm going to bring forward for you today. And it's really rewarding when you can have that time, and it actually leads to an insight and an opportunity to do things a little bit better. Hopefully I got that right. There we go. Oop. Good start. So that brings me to my theme today, which is metrics with a pulse, humanising performance in a data-driven world. And I think we talk a lot about digital these days, but I can remember not that long ago that it was all around data transformation and how we were going to utilise data to make decisions. And I think we're very much there, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for us. This topic can sound really dry, but here's the thing, right? We invest a hell of a lot in our field teams. And I don't just mean dollars, even though they are many, but think about how many cross-functional teams exist to support our sales teams in field every day. And that investment can show up in different ways. So it shows up in our time, in our energy, in our many meetings, in our cross-functional alignment, okay? And then all of our kind of strategic pieces, our buying processes, market maps, our selling models, training, reporting. You get the point. It's this full ecosystem that's designed to drive effective communication with our teams and also with our healthcare professionals and, of course, our sales performance. And there's probably a few of you in the room here that your roles are actually designed to support multiple business units. That's certainly mine, right? And that's where the complexity gets quite deep. So you've got different business units with their own portfolio, therefore their own unique customer group. They've got different brand priorities, market dynamics, and then they've all got their own go-to-market approach. And all the commercial teams today, in my opinion, are surrounded by a lot of noise, okay? So there's different opinions on what matters, what the competitors are doing, and we saw the dynamics reports this morning. There's a lot of information available about what industry best practice looks like. And then internally, you've got lots of different stakeholders, and they're all going to be looking for different things or focusing on different things or reading or interpreting the data in a different way. You've got field teams, and within that, not every rep thinks and is motivated in the same way. So you're dealing with all of these different kind of personal motivations and different opinions. Then you've got other outside pressures beyond commercial. So finance teams, okay, and they want to talk about cost to serve and margin per call, and they might want to reduce that to a number to help make decisions, okay, certainly in small businesses like mine, and I took a lot from that last session. I absolutely resonate. And then if you have that kind of global relationship as well, certainly in commercial operations, you're getting this pressure around why isn't the call rate in Australia looking as healthy as the call rate in Vietnam, okay? Or why is the CLM utilisation in Spain a lot higher than in Australia? What are you doing in Australia? Why can't you be like this market, okay? So here's the challenge. The signal can get lost in the noise because when you've got so many different teams, tools, systems, strategies in play, you've got these kind of shiny new things like AI, there's been a lot of talk about that, it becomes hard to see what's actually working and therefore maybe what's not working in your organisation. And that risks the best practice becoming this moving target that everyone's always chasing. It's really important that we still have quite consistent, standardised ways to understand our business. So we need to know what our coverage is. We need to understand, what we can reach with the field teams, the size that we have. What is our performance to a certain extent and our productivity. But that's only going to take us so far. And that's where I want to focus today because it can be really valuable to zoom in to the data a little bit more because behind every high-level metric is a pattern of human behaviour. You've got your representatives out in field navigating access barriers, okay, juggling priorities, traffic, making judgment calls in real time. And if we are looking at the right data, it can show us a little about how this might be translating. And that gives us an opportunity to course correct before we get swept up in the next shiny thing. And I think that came up yesterday. Beck, you talked about the fundamentals of marketing along with the panel. And I think I focus a lot with my team as well on the fundamentals of Salesforce effectiveness and commercial operations. There's no point looking at the kind of shiny new thing if you're not doing the fundamentals right. And the fundamentals take investment, the new shiny things take investment as well. And sometimes if we just take a pause, okay, we might be able to see an opportunity to course correct before we invest in that new dashboard, new campaign, new initiative. So, what might we do about this? And I don't want to, come off kind of all, professing or come off all TED Talk and, pretend that we've found this fundamental shift in how we work. I think the reality is a little bit more simple than that, so hopefully a pragmatic takeaway for you all today. And I'm going to use a case study, actually, from a recent example to illustrate my point. So earlier this year, pretty basic stuff, we launched a rep email campaign across Asia Pacific. As I mentioned before, my team, I work as part of a shared services function, so we're across many different brands, many different markets, kind of many different priorities. So every brand will have its kind of unique strategy and all of the assets designed to support that strategy with the customer in mind. It might be in a sequence, etc. So all of the personalisation stuff we've spoken about before. But what we were noticing was that the utilisation of the rep email was not ideally where we would like it to be. And so that was actually what the campaign was designed to achieve. It was a cross-functional effort, so my team, Commercial Excellence, coming together with the digital marketing team, learning and development, sales, and aligned around this one goal to improve the effectiveness of our communication to our healthcare professionals. Now, we've talked about the why a lot today, and I will be honest with you, we didn't focus a lot on the why, right? So I've just told you about, the strategies that have been laid out by the brand team. That work has been done. The assets are already in play. We really just focused on a very clear ask. And, I think we're talking about future technologies now, but when it comes to email, we've been talking about this for kind of 10 or 15 years. So you kind of really get the sense that our field teams would understand the power that, they can derive from sharing relevant content to their customers after a great call. So we launched in March. We had our clear ask. And as, every good sales organisation does, we put an incentive behind that so that we could really motivate and encourage the behaviour for those that are more kind of geared towards that level of motivation. We put peer champions in place, so that they could support their peers with any on-the-ground questions, and we developed a hub of support materials. So we were pretty happy with that approach. And at the end of Q2, I pulled the numbers. Success. We had seen a 30% increase in email activity across the region. Not only that, we had above average open and click-through rates. So that was kind of giving us an indication that what we were sending was reaching the right customer and that they were engaging with the content that we had. So high fives. On the surface, the numbers look really good, right? So we're quite happy with this. And some markets were actually coming from quite a low baseline. So we were pleased to see this uptick. There was a lot to be happy about. But this is where our surface level KPIs and metrics that we often use to incentivise our teams can be quite misleading. So going about my quarterly deep dive in preparation for my meeting with the different country directors, I took particular interest in the weekly email activity at a representative level, so not a small undertaking. Right across the region. And what I found was actually this classic case of hitting the target but missing the point. Across that period, 80% of the weeks, no emails were actually sent at all. So instead what we saw was this pattern of behaviour. Every now and then, and clearly not very often, reps were stopping to bulk send emails. Ticking that KPI box. And can you blame them? Like I said, we didn't focus on the why. That work had been done by our brand leads, not to take that away from them, but we gave them a really clear campaign metric, and they hit it. On the flip side, our call data was healthy. It was super consistent. So I started to rationalise, in preparation for these discussions, maybe the relevant email that's coming in follow-up to support that customer journey or provide that patient material post these great in-field conversations was just going to arrive a little bit late, but not so lucky. I then went and had a look at the content. The bulk of the sends were symposium invitations and celebrating days of significance like World Heart Day, World Contraceptive Day. Important, sure, but not quite what we had in mind. Those opportunities that we had to send these timely relevant follow-ups had been missed. So then you've kind of got to sit back and ask yourself, did we really improve patient care through this ask? Did we support our customers in any meaningful way? Or did we just hit an arbitrary metric and move on? Because on the surface, it had actually looked like a success, but below, obviously, we were seeing that there was a real opportunity to shift the needle. And this example reminded me that metrics without context can mislead, and that's exactly why I think we need to think about the human behind the performance. And it took me back to this quote from Dan Pink's TED Talk, The Puzzle of Motivation. I'm not sure if any of you have watched this yourself. It's actually quite old, but it's before I became a podcast addict. I was a TED Talk addict on my long drives out to Macquarie Park. And I used to listen to this one quite a lot when I was a sales manager. And I think it perfectly captures the tension between incentives and insight. So in that talk, Dan Pink says, rewards by their very nature narrow our focus. That's helpful when there's a clear path to a solution, but for problems that require creative conceptual thinking, they can be dangerous. So Dampic makes the point in his work that incentives work well for simple rule-based tasks where the path to success is super straightforward. He uses something called the candle problem to illustrate this. But in complex, ambiguous, or creative work like personalising sales strategy or personalising your customer engagement, narrowing focus can blind us to better solutions. Because people start to focus on the reward, not the purpose. And they begin to optimise for the metric. How am I going to reach this, right? The mission can kind of go out the door. And it feels as though that might have been what happened to us here. So we gave the team a really clear target, being accountable for my part in this. Send more emails. And they did. But we unintentionally narrowed their focus because we didn't ask for better emails or more timely or customer relevant emails and lay out a plan as to how we would measure that and understand, was that working, and how we would incentivize behind that. We just asked for more and we got more. But that's not always going to be better. I think there's been a lot of discussion over the last few days around personalising engagement, relevance, etc., empathy, and I think that really does matter more. This is where volume, I think, can really trip us up. So I've been reflecting on what this might mean for us, certainly in our business as commercial leaders, but what I might be able to share with you as well. And it's quite simple, but where I've landed is if we're not careful in how we design our approach, and that's going to mean how we design our incentive, okay, how we design our communication, how we design that ask, we can just end up chasing activity instead of impact. And it is hard, and especially when you're working in a small organisation and you're trying to do a lot with a very little team or very little resource, volume can be really easy to measure and it can be a false kind of sign or sense of productivity. But this, success or, I think we want to own the word failure after our session earlier, has changed how I will go forward and how I'll be thinking about the data, okay, and what data I'll be looking at to inform our next moves. So humanising data. If there's something I'd encourage you to take away, it's these two things. It's to treat metrics as a starting point, okay, not an end point. And this question, don't just ask, did we hit the number? Instead, approach the data with the question, what does this data tell us about how we're showing up? I think that's a really powerful way to think through the lens of human behaviour. Because really behind every metric that we're looking at on the dashboard is a rep, making judgment calls, navigating access, supporting their customer, but also trying to meet these expectations that we put on them and these asks that we put out there. So if we want our campaigns to really matter and to be relevant and to get the cut through, and we saw those, volume of emails going into those GP inboxes before, I think we really need to think less about volume and think more about relevance and then design our communication and design our incentive plans around that relevance and around that human context. And as leaders, I think, again, this came up before around curiosity. I agree. I think, if we can work really hard, stay curious and connect the dots between the numbers and the relevance, that can help us to understand what's going on a little bit better, and that can help us create the trust and the impact internally, but also externally with our customers and our teams. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.